So a situationship is comfortable. That doesn't mean it's right for me and what I need, but it means that I don't have to be super vulnerable. I don't have to fear being hurt. I don't have to fear being consumed by someone and having to give everything to them, and that might be too much. If we're thinking about those people where, yeah, on the surface, situationships really suit them, it's not really that it suits them. It's more that I'm scared that if I allow more of myself to be seen or to be given to someone, that I then could get hurt.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us today. I'm excited about today's episode.
Me too. Thank you for having me. This is a really fun topic.
Yeah. It's fun. And also there's I just find the term is very new as well. Like in my space, I'm like, oh, I didn't know much about it until I started researching about it. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is a thing.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, for people who have clicked on this episode, some may be wondering whether they are or their friends are in a situationship or not. So let's start there. Like, what actually is a situationship?
Yeah. So I love that this idea that some people may actually be in one and not know.
Yeah.
Because I think until you put a name to things, sometimes it is this kind of just like ambiguous, situation that I'm in. And I love how the word situationship kind of has this self-explanatory part to it where it's like, it's a situation that I can't really label or put an exact title on, So it's often, I guess the point of them usually is either we don't want to be putting a label on something, so we're keeping it as a situationship, or it's too new to put a label on. So at the moment, we're just sort of like letting this thing organically grow and it might turn into a relationship. It might stay this way. It's kind of like we don't know what direction it's going in.
Yeah. It just sounds like it sounds messy. Like you're kind of in the unknown. And I did a bit of research and it was talking about how situationships are being labeled as a liminal space for a relationship, where a liminal space is basically that messy in-between stage. You're not in one room, but you're not in the other room. You're kind of lurking in the hallway.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's confusing.
Limbo.
It's limbo. That's what it is.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people really struggle in that space, I mean, I think as human beings, our brain loves to have things in categories and be really clearly defined. And that can be a good thing in some ways, but in other ways it can make us sort of push things before they're ready or pull out of things before we've given it a chance. And so I think it depends on your personality type, whether you're the type of person who would do well in a situationship or who would find one like an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
And I think that situationships have always been around. I think the term is fairly recent, but if I think about, without sounding super old, but in my time, it was like seeing each other rather than dating or, so it's like if I was seeing someone, it meant that something was going on, but we weren't committed or fully dating, so I feel like this is a thing that has always been. There's just been different ways to talk about it.
But Are You Happy is like that brutally honest friend whose advice you'll actually want to take. This season, we explore the psychology of perfectionism, how you can stop taking things so personally, and why group chats can feel so draining, plus what you can do about it. Our friends at Medibank understand that connection matters, especially during challenging times. That's why they've created the Medibank Family Roast, a card game designed to get families actually talking and connecting with each other. Because when family bonds are stronger, Australia is stronger. So get together and play the Medibank Family Roast. Search Medibank Family Roast. Live better with Medibank.
One thing that I'm thinking about that I'm sure people are wondering is like, what are the red flags or warning signs that a connection is turning into a situationship rather than a healthy defined relationship?
Yeah, well, even there, healthy defined, right? So the word defined means that we have actually spoken about it, that we have had an open and transparent conversation about what this is, what I want, what you want, do our needs match up? Do our expectations match up? So that really is that difference where, of course, in the beginning, we can allow for some ambiguity. We can just go, okay, let's see where this goes. Like we both know each other's general intention. Like, is this friends? Is this more than friends? Where are we at on the intimacy front? So there's, a few things we can kind of let organically grow.
Yeah.
But there usually becomes a point where someone or both, one or both parties want a bit more definition. And situationships in themselves aren't bad. I think when they are not properly discussed and almost negotiated, like everything is a negotiation, friendships, relationships, we have to look at what can I bring? What can you bring? What are my needs? What are your needs? Can we meet each other's? Does this work for both of us? And if we don't have that conversation explicitly, people get stuck in these situationships that they're not really happy in.
Yeah, totally.
But if you have those conversations and there's two people who are quite securely attached, so they have a secure attachment style, good communication skills, a situationship can be really beneficial for both parties and just suit where you're at in life.
Yeah, yeah. I really like that because like I'm hearing communication is a really important thing, and getting really clear on your intentions early on makes a massive difference. And it's hard too because I guess there's nuance to that too, because people will be like, well, you know, it's still really early. I can't really know my expectations. So again, it's like we want to kind of have a bit of a step-by-step guide, but it feels like it is a bit ambiguous in a way.
So I think what's important here is looking at what your level of tolerance to discomfort is, the discomfort of ambiguity. Some people find that very, anxiety inducing, or just really like, I'm starting to spiral. Are they even into me? Am I being too full on? Am I not being full on enough? So some people can get like that. Other people, if we think of people who may be, a bit more on the avoidant side, situationships are kind of like the best of both worlds for them. So they will probably be the one that's least likely to bring anything up and decide we need to define anything, because to be honest, they're getting the closeness and connection that avoidants do want, but without the pressure and without that sort of like neediness and like having to commit in a big way. So they'll be less likely to want to make a change to anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You've brought up some terms which I'm really curious to unpack with you around like attachment style and personality. And I'm curious because we've unpacked a lot of what the signs are of a situationship. But is there kind of a hidden formula or pattern that you've noticed in relationship dynamics? So people who come to see you in the clinic where you're like, oh, okay, this is classic situationship formula, in a way.
Yeah. Well, I've seen some really lovely situationships actually. Some of my clients, they've been really great at kind of just being able to almost hold what they need in life right now. And it's like, I might have kids at home, or I might be like really focused on my business, or I might just, want to take things easy. I've come out of a long relationship. I'd love to have a bit of fun and a bit of company and things, but so they've been quite clear and intentional around like, hey, this is where I'm at and what I need. Does that suit you? If it does, great. And also like checking in on that, because things change, a month later, 6 months later, a year later, we might be in different places. So it's that kind of revisiting of like, how is this working for you? Yeah. Like, do we see each other frequently enough? Are we having enough intimacy? Do you want more from me? Am I pushing too much on you? These are just normal conversations to be had.
Yeah.
And that's a great formula where it works really well.
Yeah.
But both parties have to be able to have that level of, communication skill, really. And transparency.
Yeah.
But the other type of formula I see, which is maybe not so positive, where it does get quite complicated, is when there is this, I guess maybe on both sides, this reluctance to have real vulnerability. If one person's not able to say, hey, I want a bit more, or this isn't really working for me, then it's this kind of trap where we have this like faux security and faux stability, but really I can only rely on you in particular windows and in particular ways. I actually don't have that secure and stable partnership that I might want, and I think there's this sort of breadcrumbing that happens, and this is not intentional breadcrumbing like in a narcissistic type of way, but just this where you get these moments of like connection and closeness and like, yay, we got to see each other, or we had a great phone call, or we, went out and had a nice date. But then the rest of the week, maybe I don't have them as like that person that I could call and just, have a cry about something too, or, just vent about something. And it, depending on what your needs are, that might not be enough.
Yeah.
And for people with an anxious attachment, they might notice that, but they're so used to that inconsistency in relationship that this is just like that same old chase cycle that they're in.
I don't know if you remember like back in the days where, I mean, I'm sounding like we're really old. Back in the days.
Here's us. It's like the 90 plus podcast here.
Yeah. But it's like, you know, is that has something to do with when people are like, yeah, I like to go for the bad guy or the bad person, you know, just is that playing into that kind of they're trapping themselves in potentially what they deserve and the attachment style they have?
Yeah, I love that you brought up the bad guy thing because there's something there, and because there's a gendered thing there too, right?
Totally.
As well, but and to be honest, more and more now, I find the gender is less, it's less, you know, the guy is the avoidant, the girl is the anxious.
Okay.
It's becoming less so that way. There probably is still a skew that, you know, it's not 50-50 in that sense, but I do find it not so stereotypically always the man that's the avoidant and the female that's the anxious one. But I guess this is where that whole bad guy thing, I don't know if it's a stereotype that men don't want to commit because they want to be able to play the field or blah, 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 where I feel that nowadays this is what feeds into a lot of that anxious need to be in this committed relationship, because the only reason you wouldn't want to commit is because you want to play the field.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where, I think there's a lot of other reasons that could be happening. That is one of them.
Yeah.
But there are many other reasons to think about, and this is where that communication piece comes in.
Yeah.
A really interesting thing that Esther Perel talks about.
I love her.
I know.
She's the best.
I love her. So, you know, she just so many drops of wisdom from this woman. But she talks about how monogamy is really like where desire and passion goes to die. And that sounds depressing at first. But
really?
But it sounds very depressing at first and probably, you know, might trigger a few people into being like, what do you mean? What she means by that is for our nervous systems to really feel safe, to be vulnerable and intimate and rely on someone and trust someone, we need consistency. We need security.
Totally.
You know, we want to know that that person is there. We know we can predict their usual behaviors. We know that they show up for us. They show us nurture and kindness, all these other things that relationships do need.
Yeah.
So what the problem is though is that desire and passion, that thrives on like mystery, thrill, you know, these kind of like novelty. Like that's what desire and passion gets fueled by.
Yes.
So if you think about like committed relationship, doesn't really have that stuff. Like it's not that it doesn't and you can't have passion and desire in a monogamous relationship. You absolutely can. But there's something about situationships that give you this kind of like foot in both worlds where it's like there's still this like novelty, adventurous, like thrilling mystery part because we're not like in this fully committed relationship. But we have these like pretend parts of the committed relationship. So we get a bit of both. So I think that can kind of keep that sort of like, I don't know, like bad boy or like kind of excitingness or, you know, sort of thrill thing to the relationship that I think hook people in. Like it can be a bit like a drug and it's hard to jump off that roller coaster in that sense.
So you were talking about attachment styles before. I'm curious to know, how does one build their awareness around what kind of attachment style they are before they go into something like a situationship?
Yeah, so look, there's a lot of online little tests and surveys and questionnaires that you can do. And, you know, like I would say, like do that. It's fun. It's probably a little bit more complex and complicated than that. But from a basic level, a lot of people will go and do something like that. So even if you look up like attachment style, John Bowlby is the person who actually created that sort of even the term, I believe, but also just the theory around attachment. And if I break it down really simply, there's 4 main attachment styles and it has sort of broadened out over the years where there's like these sort of like multiple half like merged attachment styles, which, you know, is that kind of more complex if we start digging into it deeper. But if we keep it just sort of on that more foundational learning about it, we've got 4 main attachment styles. So we've got secure, which speaks for itself. That's that real sort of more secure attachment, sort of those people who are really quite authentic and show up in their relationships, being able to be vulnerable, communicating well. There's this kind of just like stable consistency to their relationships. Then we've got the anxious attachment style, which is very much the one who fears abandonment, could come across as like clingy or needy or like having space doesn't work well for you. You know, you want to fix the problem right now. You don't want to have space. You want to just, everything is made fine again. If someone's upset or angry, I get really distressed. I find it hard to tolerate distance and disapproval.
Yeah.
Then we've got the avoidant attachment style, which is more so, people who seem a little bit like a bit more guarded, kind of takes a while to let you in. Usually they might, in an argument, just want to go away and not talk, or they shut down. They don't want to talk things through now. They really need their space. If you kind of get too needy, they really sort of back off. Yeah, so they just, it's interesting because people with avoidant attachment style very much want the connection, but they fear the connection. So where anxious attachment style is where I fear abandonment, and the avoidant is where I fear being consumed by and like taken over by someone else's needs. So I still want the connection, but I'm scared you're going to kind of take over me if I give it to you.
Yeah.
Then there's the insecure attachment style, and a lot of people worry about being this one. I feel like if you are this one, you might know, so it's probably quite clear. Generally, an insecure attachment style sadly comes from quite a history of trauma, and particularly in early childhood. But people who, they struggle to make healthy connections. They probably don't have many long-lasting even friendships. So they kind of, short friendships, short relationships. It can be very hard for them to be able to maintain that consistency and stability. So they're people who, they oscillate between the anxious and avoidant, but they do it sort of so frequently that it's hard for anyone to kind of keep up.
I was doing a bit of research and going to one of our greatest resources, TikTok.
Oh, yes.
And then I was just looking up situationships. And I know it was really great you spoke to the gender piece, because I was like, a lot of them were women talking about their experiences of a situationship. But it was really fascinating because I noticed this trend of women realizing they were in a situationship after they left.
Yeah.
And it just gets me thinking around, like, why is it that we see the unhealthy signs after we leave?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think it's that breadcrumbing where it's like, oh, I get, this is what I want. This makes me happy. This is what I'm looking for. And then that kind of like tides you over until the next breadcrumb. But in between the breadcrumbs, there is this discomfort of like, okay, I thought maybe we'd be seeing a bit more of each other, or I'm really disappointed that he didn't show up to my thing that I had that was really important, or, like different things like that, I think get sort of minimized or swept away by the kind of good bits. And whether or not there's something there around, is it that you didn't know that it was a situationship, or were you not willing to bring up certain things that would have clarified that for you? So there's a resistance in actually finding out or talking about your grievances, or saying like, hey, I need a bit more than this, or
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting too, because I guess what I noticed was that I guess there's like a greater perspective that people get once they finish or the relationship changes, where they're like, oh shit, yeah, I fully betrayed myself in that moment. Oh yeah, I actually did want him to show up to that thing, and I was fully people pleasing. So it's like, it's such a mirror of where within ourselves we need to kind of look deeper.
Yeah, I think a really, really common thing I see is people excusing things. And it's not to say that we have to hold everyone to the highest accountability for every single thing they do or don't do, but there's a dishonesty in ourselves. And it's often to protect, if I really admit to myself how hurt I am about that, I have to actually let that pain come up and I have to feel it. And maybe it's just easier to say that, oh, it wasn't that important, and, their work is really, really important to them and they're really busy, so that's okay, So I think that people struggle to hold both. Yeah. Yes, they have an important work thing on, but I'm also really disappointed that they didn't make the effort to come. You can hold both. It doesn't have to be they are a terrible person for not coming to my event, but it could be, it really hurt me and I am sad about that. But I do also understand that they have their own stuff going too. So, whereas we're often either in one camp or the other.
So
they're horrible or it was fine.
That's so true. No, I fully see that. And I think it's important that we Yeah, give light to both. Yeah. I'm really curious, like, why do people become so emotionally invested in situationships even when there's no real commitment?
Yeah, and this is where I was thinking before about the different personality types. Some people are not able to be in a situationship without catching feelings, so to speak, you know, and you'd like to think that anybody in a situationship has a certain amount of feelings for the other person, you know, and cares about them and enjoys spending time with them. But when that trickles into, you know, falling in love or things like that, sometimes inevitable, but some people, particularly when you bring sex into the piece, right, or intimacy in whatever way, some people can make really sort of, I guess, I don't know if it's about being in denial, but they sort of act like, oh, yeah, this will be fine. I can have sex with this person and not catch feelings or, you know, and that's that slippery slope where it's like, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. And then, you know, a month or two later, it's like, oh, no, I'm now like fully invested in this. And whereas other people can really separate sex and love and, you know, sex is fun, it's all great, you know, but it doesn't create this sort of like closeness and intimacy from an emotional perspective. I can sort of separate the two. Yeah. So you really need to think about knowing yourself and understanding yourself and whether a situationship is something that you can get into or whether sort of from the beginning it's like, hey, if that's what you're after, that's all good, but I know that that doesn't work for me. Yeah. Like I'll be, you know, a month or two's time, I'm going to be in love with you. And if that's not what you're after, like let's not do this.
Yeah,
you know?
Totally. And you can, I guess, in a way, you can get so swept up in like the, you know, getting attention and feeling loved. Like it's a great feeling being loved and being seen. So I can imagine it being really difficult. So what's the brain's role in keeping people stuck in situationships? Like there's things like hope or fantasy or the intermittent reactions that you were kind of talking about before.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's all of that sort of like the oxytocin, the dopamine, the serotonin, like all the good feelings that, you know, if we think of it as like, I'm almost imagining like a pinball machine is like bing, 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 and like all these, you know, and it's very similar to like the pleasure center, the reward center of the brain. And then if we're thinking about like in any sort of addictions work that I do, it's very much around what are the things that kind of light up those areas in my brain and then what happens when I don't get it? And then, you know, do I fall into that chase cycle where it becomes like I'm obsessed or consumed by it, because even the chase is part of the addiction bit. And it's not to say we're addicted, but it all becomes this cycle and every part of the cycle is just as sort of like pulling you in as the other. I also think that part that Esther Perel talked about where it's like, you know, the desire, the thrill, there's a fantasy element. Yeah. Because usually in a situationship, you're not there, you know, all throughout the night or like when they're having a really shitty day or, you know, when they're like got horrible diarrhea while they were on holidays and got gastro or something, you know, like you're usually not there for those like real life, like, you know, kind of mood killer moments. Yeah. And so it keeps that novelty thing alive. So it's kind of like, you know, we swipe and we see a new reel and it's like, you know, so we kind of get this still novelty thing that keeps coming with the situationship. So the brain is very much like getting a lot of these reward stuff happening. Whereas when you live with someone or see each other a lot or like there's this real, you know, stability and consistency, that reward like novelty center isn't going off so much. That doesn't mean that there aren't beautiful experiences that you have in committed long-term relationships, but it's just different. It works on different parts of the nervous system and the brain.
Yeah, totally. No, that's good to know. So when it comes to situationships, like how, because again, it's great that you've painted that. It can be great, but also can be really hard and can have massive impacts. How does situationships impact self-esteem and self-worth over time?
Yeah, I love that it's like our brains were connected because I'm like, that was exactly the next part I felt we needed to talk about, you know, the self-worth and the self-esteem thing. So I think on both parties, right? So let's say the people who are really happy with the situationship in terms of, well, let's put it this way. There's two types of happy with being in a situationship. One where it really is actually meeting my needs and it's legitimately where I'm at in life and it's great. And then there's another happy with it, which is more like this is just my comfort space. So a situationship is comfortable. That doesn't mean it's right for me and what I need, but it means that I don't have to be super vulnerable. I don't have to fear being hurt. I don't have to fear being consumed by someone and having to give everything to them, and that might be too much. Yeah. So if we're thinking about those people where, on the surface, situationships really suit them. It's not really that it suits them. It's more that I'm scared that if I allow more of myself to be seen or to be given to someone, that I then could get hurt. So there's this real sort of self-esteem and the idea that if I get hurt like that, I don't know if I can cope.
Yes.
So this real like sort of self-esteem and self-worth bit on the more avoidant side.
Yeah.
But then on the more anxious side, who wants more and maybe a situationship isn't actually right for them, but they've kind of gotten sucked into one and now they're like, oh God. I think on that end, the not leaving or the not bringing up the parts that aren't working for them to even see if maybe we could make this something that could work for both of us, that's that self-esteem piece there where it's like, if I'm not keeping them happy or if that their needs are more important than mine, if I start to speak up or say what I want, maybe they'll leave me. Maybe there isn't enough that I bring that would make it worth it if they don't have that flexibility that they wanted or, so there's this idea that, my needs aren't as important, so just don't worry about it. Or maybe that I can't find anyone better. I can't find someone that will commit to me. So there is an element of that self-worth stuff that can play a part for some people.
Yeah. And it's interesting you talk about that last piece around one of the reasons being like, oh, maybe there isn't other people, another person out there for me. And I notice this with a lot of my girlfriends who are still single and they're trying to find their person. And a lot of them are feeling really disheartened. So it's like I can imagine just that being further evidence of why you might just stay in it because it feels comfortable, feels familiar in a way.
Yeah. And it is really sad, this idea that, and maybe some of it is exacerbated by social media or, just stories and Hollywood and all that stuff about there only being one person for you. And, I think that that's wild to think that there's only one person out there that I could possibly have this amazing connection with or who could love me like that. And it really exacerbates this what's the word? Scarcity. It really exacerbates this scarcity mindset of like, there won't be anyone else or there won't be anything better. I see this with my clients so much, and I'm always like, trying to hold myself back from being like, trust me, there are people out there for everyone, and there isn't just one person. If you think you found that one person and then it didn't work out, like you have no idea who you're going to meet in life, and you have no idea what's even happening tomorrow. Like you just don't know what's going to happen. In a good way, also in a bad way. It works both ways, but we just never know. And I think that there are so many things we don't even have in our mind yet of what type of person we might meet and want and how they might respond to us.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, you've been in this space for like over 10 years working with a lot of relationships. So hopefully that's a sign of hope for anyone listening in, unsure if they're going to find their person.
Yeah. And if you're not happy, if you're not happy in something, and if it's not saying if you're not happy, just leave, but if you are not happy and you have tried quite hard to have these difficult conversations with that person, if it's not changing and if they're not willing to at least put the effort to try and make it work with you, that's the thing I just see so much of is people just go, okay, well, I guess this is all right. I'll settle, like this will be okay. And I think situationships can, for some people, be a version of settling. I can't really get the thing that I want, but this is okay. So this is okay.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up because I was going to ask, like, what are some of the signals that someone should seriously consider leaving a situationship? So that, would you say, is one of them? Is there more?
Yeah, I think feeling lonely in a relationship is a big one. I mean, this could also speak for, committed relationships as well. But if you're feeling lonely and disconnected in your relationship, that doesn't mean you should leave, but it should mean that something is not right. Something is not happening. There's a need that's not being met. And if you don't start actively having those open conversations about it, it's going to build and build and build. So I think noticing where I feel lonely even with my partner doesn't make it always their fault that they're doing something wrong, but there's something here that is not expressed on my end. And what is that? And if I express it, how do they respond? Are they dismissive? Are they open? Do they want to hear? Are they like, sorry, this is all I can give you? And sometimes we need to actually listen to what they're saying. If they're saying this is all I can give, at what point do I go, okay, is that enough for me? No, so I'm going to leave. You know, I think often there's this like acceptance that the other person can't give me what I want, but then it's like, okay, all right, well, that's just all they can give.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'm like, what I'm hearing too is like that honesty, the transparency is what you really need. And also the receptivity of, okay, is this person willing to hear what my needs are? And then if not, well, then I think you've got a lot of your answer already as well.
If this is to have a partner, whether it's a situationship partner or, you know, long-term partner, if they're not workable, and when I say workable, it's like, you know, can they see their part in things? Are they interested to know how they impact you? If your needs aren't being met, can they hear that without getting defensive? And this also comes to how you put it out there too. So, you know, you've got to also take responsibility for, am I coming at this in a passive aggressive way? Am I being, you know, sort of demanding, or am I being too vague? The one I see a lot is people be too vague. They kind of put their needs out there in this really like almost like you have to be digging to find what they're actually trying to say. And then they feel like they've been out there and said what they wanted, and their partner's like, what? I had no idea that this is what you're trying to say.
Wow.
You know, because it's so hard to put my needs out there that I'll do it in this really convoluted, like low-key way that goes straight over the other person's head.
Is it ever worth, and I mean, again, like with the work that you've done with a lot of couples, is it ever worth trying to turn a situationship into a relationship, or is it just better to just walk away?
No, I think it's, a great opportunity to turn a situationship into a relationship. Like I said at the beginning, where situationships can just be an inevitable part of the getting to know each other and deciding if this is something that I would like to commit to and turn into a long-term relationship. So I think that it probably becomes more difficult to turn it into a relationship if it's been a really long-term situationship where one person hasn't been happy about it. That's where there's, you know, there's a lot of pain and hurt. And so there'd have to be quite a bit of repair and a really intentional change in how we communicate our needs and how we respond to each other in order to have that change into a long-term relationship. But not that that's impossible, but you'd both have to be willing to work on it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Something that I am curious about, just in case anyone's tuning in and might be realizing that, oh shit, maybe I am in a situationship, or maybe they are in a situationship, but they can't quite tell how to define it in a way. What are some concrete tools you give people to assess whether their current situationship is healthy or unhealthy?
Yeah. Okay. This is a good one because, again, it really is going to be about putting things into your control. So it's like looking at, if we look at, okay, I'm in a situationship, I can't control. So we're not even going to look at what the other person does. Okay. You know, like he does this, she does that, blah, blah, blah.
Which feels nice as well.
Exactly. Like we love going, oh yeah, but they do this and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
We're going to completely sort of ignore that half of the situationship, and we're only going to look at ourselves. So that's number one, is like, okay, I need to, if I want to get clear around if this is healthy or not, I need to first look at me. Now, do I show up in this as authentically as possible? Like when I am upset about something, do I say it? When something makes me angry, do I show it? Maybe I hide those things, or maybe I show it too, you know, maybe I'm uncontained and I don't show it in the right way or in a way that can be heard. But so first we're going to look at, what's my behavior like in this relationship? Do I feel proud of myself and the way I, you know, communicate and act in this relationship? The other one would be, what is my sense of self and my self-worth like? Now, it's not our partner's job to build our self-worth. That's our own job. But based on particular behaviors, and the way we're treated, our self-worth can take a hit, you
Totally.
know. So I would be looking at, what do I think about myself as a person? Do I feel like my needs are important? Do I feel like I am a likable person, that I'm a good person? If the answer is no, or I'm not sure to some of these, then I'd go, okay, is that based on maybe some of the things that were happening growing up? Is that based on how I'm treated at work? Or is that based on, some of the ways my partner treats me, the things they say or the time and effort they give me? Yeah. So starting to look at, is there an impact on my self-worth in being in this?
Yeah.
Then we can start looking at the other person. So am I proud of that person? Do I have respect and admiration for how they carry themselves, the way they treat people, the way they treat me? Like these are a lot of important things, because if we have, even in a situationship, if we're in a situationship with someone who, I don't know, treats people kind of crap, or like doesn't have much respect for certain things, or maybe behaves in ways that we don't really look up to. I mean, that's an interesting thought in itself. Is like, well, what am I doing here? Like, okay, we have fun together or whatever, but I don't really respect them, or like they don't drive me to be a better person, or, it's sort of not really going anywhere.
Yeah. So I can imagine as well, like, so if people have now like gone through those questions, which have been really great, and they've got this awareness, so they're like, oh crap, yeah, it is unhealthy. I see the bits that I need to take responsibility for. I can see the bits that I probably need to communicate some impacts that the other person's doing to me. So what's next after building that awareness? It's like, okay, do they come and see someone like you, or do they just have that chat,
Yeah. And look, I love it. I love it when people come in. I've even seen both partners of the situationship in together, which I love.
That's great.
Like people think that therapy, like it's not a, I guess, really common thing for people to go, oh, let's go see a therapist together when we're in a situationship.
Yeah.
But I love the ones that have, and I'm like, this is, particularly if it's something that you want to continue working through in yourself, whether or not that situationship lasts forever, there's a lot of learning you can get about how you have shown up in that dynamic and how they've affected you, and the type of sort of pitfalls that are common for people to fall in. Often people will nowadays are more likely to come in and see a therapist, which is great. But you can, if you feel confident in your ability to communicate, I mean, a step one would be to try and communicate it yourself. I think that's important. And I think this is where people might struggle. And if you're struggling with that, then usually therapy is a great place to kind of have a bit of a, someone to help you be able to articulate things and help the other person to also listen and be able to kind of nut out some of the issues that have come up. But I think if you get to a place where you're realizing, okay, I don't know if this is really working for me, or I'm not happy with certain things, being able to say that really clearly is important, because it gives the other person the opportunity to decide whether or not it's going to work for them. So if you sit on it, the other person actually, it's not fair on them.
Totally.
Because they're just going to keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah, because they're in a world of everything's good.
Yeah,
that's so true.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I did want to do a little caveat there around, we're not talking about like this. If we're going to sort of the place where there's abuse or abusive dynamics happening, then I think that it would be dealt with differently. So if you do your sort of introspective, like reflective work around, okay, what's going on here? How am I being treated? How is my self-worth? What is my view of the other person? If you identify abusive dynamics, that are really unhealthy and probably quite painful to realize that might be happening, I think I would recommend going about it a different way. Because if there is a sort of a power dynamic or some type of domestic violence or abuse there, I think it's important that safety gets prioritized first. So you may or may not decide to directly communicate with that person.
There is something that I am curious about, because I think, we all love our friends, and, we love when they get into relationships, or if, let's say, if, a friend gets into a situationship that actually isn't looking good. Like, what do you do? Because it's this fine line, right, where it's like, it's not my business, it's their relationship, I shouldn't get involved. But then you have so much love for that person that you don't want your friend getting hurt.
Yeah. So, well, what kind of things would you be seeing? I guess that's the question, is like, because sometimes we can just sort of see our friend's new man or new girl and be like, I'm not a big fan, versus like, oh, they're actually treating you badly,
Yes.
So is it just the kind of like, oh, I don't really get why you're with them, or is it like something is not great happening here that you mean?
Yeah, I reckon obviously that would just depend on what people see. But I think what I've really noticed is like friends being like, oh, they're not treating you well.
Yeah, okay.
Like I'm seeing the impact on you, because I've definitely seen that where friends get into relationships and I literally see them change and kind of somewhat disappear, and it's really hard to see that.
It's really sad. It is really sad. And I think having good friends around you that can tell you that is so important. But I get that there is this fine line, and sometimes it can push people away when we're too honest.
Yeah.
So I think it's about even balancing our own emotional reaction to seeing our friend, diminish in a relationship that's not great. So if I can't manage my own, whether it's anger, fear, pain about what's going on with my friend, then when I talk to them about it, it's going to come out too strong. It's going to kind of muddy the waters, and they're probably going to either be not ready to hear it, so they're, going to deny it and whatever, or it could push them into a shame or, sort of thing where they then want to distance. So it would be about really regulating yourself first.
Yeah.
And being able to go, okay, what do I want my friend to get out of this? Like if my conversation with them, when I leave, what do I want to leave them with and hope that they really take in? And I think one of the biggest things would be, that I love and care for them.
Yeah.
And then the other thing would be that I'm worried about them, and probably some pointers around the things that I'm worried about.
Yeah.
So the things that I'm seeing or hearing that are making me worry and why it's making me worry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think when people come in too strong and it's like, out of a good place, it leaves them more feeling judged.
Yeah. Which is hard. And I think it's one of those aspects you were talking about before around there's certain things that are out of our control. Like we can come with all the good intention, but it's just got to see how it all lands in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting. You mentioned, you spoke a bit about shame. And I think, again, like when I was watching a lot of videos on Instagram and TikTok, I noticed a theme of shame or embarrassment that people feel after a situationship. So I guess I want to hear from you. Like, what do you want to say to those people that are sitting in that at the moment?
Yeah. So it's interesting that there's this almost like a self-blame that comes with that. And I'm not sure if that's whether people are feeling shame that they didn't realize something was a situationship, or if it's more shame that they didn't, I guess, stand for themselves, like that they let their needs go by the wayside and that they prioritize somebody else. And then there's this kind of realization of like, oh, that person didn't really have my back, and why was I so, good to them? So I think there's a couple of things here. It's like the first one is the one where it's like, I feel a bit bamboozled. Like I thought this was a thing and obviously it wasn't. Part of that is, that's life in terms of we will always be wanting to see the things that we want to see, and sometimes we're not ready to see the things that we don't. But it's also a learning experience. I would be looking at, okay, what did I miss? What were the things? So rather than looking at it with shame, it's like, okay, let's get curious. I think curiosity is such a great tool to use in so many different ways. But if I'm too stuck in my shame, I'm just beating myself up and I'm not learning anything.
Yeah.
And I would want to learn from things and hopefully not have it repeat. Or at least if it is repeating, I might be aware a bit earlier in the piece.
Yeah.
So getting curious around what were the things that I missed? What were the things that maybe I could have done? So maybe asked for more clarity or communicated in a way that really was more upfront in the beginning, or, not let my needs kind of be secondary. So there are things that I might have contributed to this in a non-self-blaming way. It's just this was my part in that interaction.
Yeah.
And then the other side is that also, if someone doesn't treat us well, it's interesting that I feel ashamed about that.
Yeah.
That's their shame. And
Yes.
they may not be ashamed in themselves, and that's fine. But actually, I'm carrying the shame for someone else's behavior.
Yeah. Wow. Do you find that's a very common thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly with, abuse and things like that. It's often the person who's been the recipient of abuse who feels in some way really ashamed of themselves. And it's a very deep wound to try and work through. But really, it's when one person is acting so shamelessly, it's almost like their shame gets transferred over to us, and we're the ones carrying the shame, which actually has nothing to do with us.
Yeah. That's massive. Yeah. And I really love that you're speaking to kind of the healing piece that can come, and I love that you spoke about curiosity, because I think that is like, the greatest teacher that we can have.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know from you, like, is there anything else that you would advise from someone coming out of a situationship in order to heal in a healthy way? Is there anything else?
Yeah, I think the idea of rejection or not being wanted or not being good enough is a big piece around the coming out of a situationship, because it's usually, if you're the one who wanted it to become something more, or, and it didn't, there's this idea of like, if I had been different, or if I'd been better, or if I'd been more beautiful, or blah, 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 like if I'd been funnier, like maybe there's this kind of like self-deprecating part. So looking at this sort of, I guess, rejection in general isn't actually a statement on who you are. It's just a statement on where the other person is at and where you're at, and that it wasn't the right time, place, or thing. And so we do kind of fill in these gaps where it then becomes like, oh no, it was something wrong with me, rather than like, this just wasn't something that person wanted.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But we make that leap, and it's really unhelpful.
Yeah, totally. And it's so easy to kind of like mesh it all together. And I think what I'm hearing in it is like not to make it a personal attack on your identity or worth, but just to see it purely as, oh, this was just a misalignment, and this is just, it's not going to work, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I do think that there is then that whole scarcity thing. So it's like, okay, I've been rejected, and that hurts, and that's normal. And it's okay to feel like, oh, that wasn't nice, and to be in have your moment with it.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, where is it that I feel I'm now, that there's something wrong with me, or that there's something other people wouldn't like, like there isn't this, it doesn't need to carry on as a theme. It's just sort of like, in this one instance, it wasn't what they wanted.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That whole, I don't have to be everyone's cup of tea type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that can be hard, particularly with people pleasers or people, really want to be liked and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to build that muscle of going, I might not be everyone's cup of tea, but that doesn't mean that my cup of tea, there's something wrong with it.
There's no like consistency or stability like versus a secure one.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's in a nutshell the 4 main attachment styles. You can learn a bit more about it online, but if you sort of just reflect on what you act like when there's an argument with you and someone that you love, what are your fears, and what is your way of coping? That would be a pretty good way to start having a think about what your attachment style is, and, thinking about your family relationships in the family you grew up in. Do I feel close and connected to my primary caregivers? And based on where you're at and what your attachment style is, you will be able to know whether a situationship is going to work for you, or whether that would actually be very stressful.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters on which this podcast was recorded.